I sat on the floor under the red strobe by comms and wrote names on my forearm because paper kept going blank. The ink made lines. Then the lines thinned and went weak and left a clean strip of skin like I had wiped it. The door tags were empty plastic. The whiteboard was a ghost. Alarms flickered and didn't make a sound. The recorder on the desk played back my voice with holes punched in it. I said, "We have to keep track of who's left. There's me. And then there was nothing where the name should have been, just a tight, high ring that made my back teeth ache. My best friend sat with his knees up under his chin and watched my arm. He had his pen in his mouth. We hadn't slept. It started simple. The whiteout hit and sealed us in. The wind shoved at the walls. We were used to storms. I checked the seals, checked the generator, checked the radios, tech stuff. Everything looked fine. I don't go for stories. I go for systems. By the second day, the radios gave nothing back. Not static. Not clicks. Just a flat deadness. We pinged all channels. We switched sets. Dead air. I remember how we stood there waiting for that tiny hiss you take for granted and got silence like a lid pressing down. The first weird thing we saw was the name strip on the cabin near the laundry. It faded while we were looking at it. It started as a normal black print. Then the edges went soft. Then the letters washed out to gray and then clear. "Cheap label maker," I said. Ink froze. My friend said the tape was thermal. It didn't wash. It just left nothing. We tested it because that's what you do. We're not poets. We took a fresh roll and typed my name and stuck it to the door of the mess. It looked fine. We went for coffee. When we came back, it was bare plastic with a square of newer clean in the dust where the strip had been. It hadn't fallen off. It didn't leave glue. It just wasn't there. We did the whiteboard. We wrote the shift chart. I wrote lines and boxes. He wrote our names across the top. The lines broke in the middle while I was holding the pen. They went faint like old chalk. The names went faster. I wiped with my sleeve to see if that was it. The cloth came back dry and white. When the radios kept giving us nothing, we started making tapes. We stood in comms and said roll calls. I hit record and said each name like a check. I wanted to send it when the story cleared. We played it right away to be sure. The sound went fine until a name. Then there was that blank. No pop. Just a hole. Then that little whine that makes you rub your ear. We tried again. Same holes. Same ring. We swapped mics. We used my phone. The holes were in the same place every time. The same names cut out. We thought it was a problem with the words. We asked each other what else we called each person. Nicknames. Middle names. Last names only. Numbers. We said, no full names, okay? We made rules. We picked numbers. I was 7. He was 6. He laughed and said, that was me, always the tech, making it a system. I said, that's how you live through storms. He nodded and stuck a strip of tape on his shirt with a big 6 in Sharpie. I wrote 7 on mine. I stuck it over my ID because the patch looked weird. The color went off. His patch had a blank across the middle where the name used to be, like glare under plastic. When I pulled my patch out of the holder, it just had the logo and research station, and under that a smooth field where my name should have been. No white where someone scraped. Just nothing. The day the first person got hurt was the day I decided this wasn't a prank and I wasn't going to fix it with better markers. It was in the hallway by the med fridge. The medic was there. He watched me write his name on a piece of foil with a nail because the pens gave up fast. I pressed hard until my hand hurt. The letters looked like shiny scratches. He said, "Don't do that, man." My friend said, "Let him test it." We stared at the word. It went dull. It was like the light stopped catching. Then it was the same dull foil as the rest. The scratches were still there if you felt them with a finger. You could feel the grooves. But you couldn't see the word. When I tried to say his name to see if the tape would cut, I got out the first sound and my throat closed like a hand. My breath stopped mid-word. The medic doubled over like he'd been punched. He hit the floor and gasped. His eyes went wide. He waved a hand at me and shook his head until I shut up. After, he had a nosebleed and he wouldn't look at me. We didn't try that again on purpose, not with a person standing there. We switched to roles. Cook, medic, tech, ops. No proper names. We put the numbers on our chests. We wrote it on the back of our hands. The ink held if it wasn't a real name. We made a rule that if you had to say it, you breathed out first and didn't try to force it if it caught. People started wearing blank things. ID patches went clear. Badges turned to smooth plastic. The wall of headshots in the hall got this glare that ate all the names under the photos, and then it climbed into the photos and made the faces go gray at the edges. We covered it with duct tape and tried not to look. We did more tests because we kept thinking there had to be a dumb reason. Heat? A chemical? The storm messing with the ionizers? We wrote in pencil. We wrote in grease. We burned letters into wood with a solder iron. We hammered a name into a spoon. We took a sewing needle and ash and put a line of dots on the medic's ankle to spell his name because he said, "Screw it, I want to belong to myself." It scabbed for a day. Then the scab flaked, and there was skin. You could feel a line if you ran a thumb, but it was nothing to look at. He got real quiet after that. We kept making tapes. On day 4, the dropouts got longer. If I said, "Okay, roll call, cook, medic, ops," the tape came back with my voice and then gaps that swallowed the consonants like they were never there. It didn't mute. It cut. It took whole syllables without leaving a bump. After each gap was that high, thin ring. It wasn't on the meter. I could hear it anyway. At night, I laid on my bunk with my hat over my face and I could hear it when the wind hit the roof and the whole building made that low steel hum. The ring cut through the hum like a pin. The first silent zone slid down the upper stairwell and sat there like fog. That is just how it felt in my chest. You could see into it. It looked like air. But when you put a hand into it, your ears went wrong and your breath came back at you too slow. We had to run power cords through that stairwell. When I went up to plug in the backup lights, my chest got tight and I had to step back. I told my friend to hold my belt while I leaned in. I said, "If I stop moving, pull me." He said, "We should go around." There was no around. We had cut the rest of the building off to keep the heat in. We braced our feet and did it. Inside that zone, even my jacket made no sound. No zipper touch. No foot scrape. It was like my brain had forgotten to edit the noise out, and I only noticed how hollow quiet is. When I said okay, nothing moved in my throat. It hurt. The zones got bigger every day. They weren't walls. They were rooms. They were halls. They had weird, soft edges. If you stepped wrong, it got you to the knee and your leg went empty and cold and you felt your bones ring a little from the inside. If you said anything real in there, the air grabbed it and hung on. We had to cut the station into bubbles of safe air with doors propped and doors shut and tape X's where not to step. We drew a map on the whiteboard of safe paths. The lines faded while I was drawing them. My friend took a photo with his phone and it saved as a white square. People started becoming their hoodies. He's the red beanie. She's the one with the yellow socks. The cook wrapped his jacket in green tape so we could say, "Green, you stay." He said we made him feel like a dog. He laughed to make it a joke and then wiped his face. The faces went blank and tight when we tried to call to them. You could not pull someone back with a name anymore. We did hand signals. We held each other's sleeves. Someone said we should tattoo numbers instead. We didn't have a gun. We had thread and a needle. I said no. I was the person with the kid, so it was my choice. We tied numbers on with nylon string. Those held. On day 6, the medic thought he could beat it. He took a lab scalpel and scratched his name shallow on the inside of his forearm where the skin is pale. Just a small thing under his watch band. He didn't show anyone until it went away in an hour. He cried. He put his face on the table in rehab and made no sound. I rubbed his back. I said nothing is taking anything. It's just ink. He shook his head. He wasn't doing it to the ink. He was doing it to himself. I didn't say that. I'm not good with comfort. Breathing got hard in some places for no reason we could see. You'd think it was heat, then the next hour cold. I think it was the dead patches of air. We made routes that swung wide. The path to the bunks went through storage by the drill cores. It was a long way. We didn't take the short way because the short way had that press on your chest that made you see little gold lines around things. The tape log stopped having useful data. Any report that had a person in it sounded like a list of the tech, the cook. My notes lost proper nouns. I wrote talk to, and the space after the dash stayed blank, even though I remembered writing it. I tried to get clever. I wrote half words. It ate those too. It didn't like when I tried to trick it. That sounds like I think something wanted anything. I don't. I think it was rules. It had rules we didn't get. Don't assign names. Don't hold them. Don't say them. Don't write them. That's enough to kill a place like this. We kept each other normal as much as we could. We ate at the same table. We counted. We said, 6, 7. We tapped twice for yes, once for no. We slept in shifts. When the alarms failed to sound and only blinked, we took turns standing under them with a stopwatch just in case. We told stupid jokes with no names in them. He told one about a guy and a guy in a boat. It didn't land. We laughed anyway. By the end of the week, the station shrank down to comms, the mess, and the little hall with the weather map. The map was blank because the feed died, so it was just a backlit white square. We kept it on for light. The rest was dark. The zones moved. We felt them through our boots. The floor got stiff and then too soft like a stage. The cook went to check the freezer and he didn't come back. We found him in the doorway kneeling with his hands on the floor. His mouth was open. He looked like he was trying to breathe steam and nothing came out. We pulled him back into the good air. He rolled on his side and threw up and it was pink because he had bitten his tongue. He wouldn't look at us. Later he went to sleep and didn't wake up. We didn't say why. We didn't say he had no patch and his jacket was just a jacket. We didn't say anything. We tried being smart. We tried code words that weren't names. We called people by tools. Wrench. Lid. Page. It held for a while. Then one morning we did roll and I said page for ops, and the tape still cut right there and I choked on it. He put a hand on my back and I stopped. Later, when we were alone, he said, "It knows what we mean." I said, "There's no it." He looked past me down the hall where the dark was heavier. He said, "Okay, the rule knows." That sat wrong in my head. He smiled like he was sick and said, "You don't have to call it a ghost, man. It's just a rule." The day before the end, the big silence pushed into comms. We were down to 4. Me, my friend, the medic, Ops? We had moved the coffee maker into comms to avoid crossing the bad stair. I could stand in the doorway and feel it. It made this tiny, tight pull in my head and a ring in my left ear that would not stop. When I breathed in and said, "Okay," the air came out with no sound. That freaked me in a way I didn't show. I need the sound of my own voice to make my brain think. I know that sounds dumb. We all get used to hearing ourselves. When it went away, I felt like my mouth was full of someone else's hand. We had one plan left. I told him in the mess where it was still safe enough to talk soft. I said, "We can anchor with something it wants. Put it on a leash." He said, "Words?" I said, "Names." He shook his head. He said, "We can't say them." I said, "We can say mine." He said, "No." I said, "It doesn't care if it's mine. It's just a word it wants. If I say it, it will take it and leave you alone for a while." He said, "You're not going to test this with your lungs." I said, "We have no lungs if it takes everything." We argued like always. He kept his voice flat on purpose to keep me flat. He said, "You don't even believe in anchors, man." I said, "I believe in drawing fire." He said, "It's not a fire." I said, "Okay, it's a hole. I'll jump first." He said a lot of no, then leaned his head on the locker and said, "I hate this." And I said, "Me too." And we stood there and listened to the wind hit the outer wall and make no sound. We stood there until my knees felt like sand. We went to comms. We put tape across the floor where the edge felt worst. The medic sat on the table. He looked old. Ops sat on the floor, with her back to the panel with dead green lights. I put the recorder on the tray. The big light on the wall blinked and made no sound, and the red was everything for 2 seconds, then nothing. The map glowed and didn't help. I took off my 7 and stuck it on the recorder. I told him to hold my belt. He took it in both fists. He nodded. He said, "Do not show off." I said, "When have I ever?" He flared his nostrils at me. He said, "Every day." I smiled without feeling it. I took one step into the quiet. It came up my shins and made the hair on my arms go flat. I took another. It pressed at my ribs. It wasn't heavy. It was hollow. It felt like standing too close to a big speaker but with no bass. I set my feet. The recorder light was red. I breathed out until my chest was empty. I tried to say my name. My throat sealed. My mouth made the shape. No sound. My friend pulled once. I shook my head. I shook my head. I breathed again. This time I forced air hard from the back of my throat while I shaped the syllables. It was like pushing something big through a small pipe. My eyes watered. My lungs burned. I got the first half out. The air heaved back and took it. The medic slid off the table to his knees and grabbed the side. He made a sound with no sound. Ops reached for him and her hand went through a bad edge and she flinched and pulled back, shaking it. I said the last half of my name. It hurt. It felt like a string in my chest snapped and I heard that ring, the same one from the tapes, but inside. It was thin and it drilled behind my eyes. My friend grunted and he held me like he wanted to tear me back. I finished the last sound hard and it came out, and the gap took that too. It wanted more. I knew that then. Not with words. With the way the shape of the quiet leaned. It leaned the way a thing leans when you open a door and wind sucks. The only thing it could take was the thing I had that fit its rule. So I said my name again. It took it faster. My friend yelled, "Stop!" and his voice came out wrong, like a hiccup. I looked at him and his face was wet. I said my name again and again until the ring in my head was the only thing, and I couldn't feel my hands. I reached back and put his fingers on my belt a second time and made his hands close. I hoped he would remember my face. He doesn't forget details. He saves lists in his head. That's why I loved him. If anyone could keep something of me without the word, it was him. The edge moved in. It pressed my shoulders. My lungs seared. My field of view went white at the sides. I said the last part of my name one more time and felt my chest spasm. It stopped. It did not let the last bit out. It just erased the push, and then there was nothing. Not black, not pain, just a white space like the whiteout outside. I heard him say 7, like a prayer, and the sound broke off in the middle because the edge hit him too. He hauled and I didn't move. I had no weight. The recorder light kept blinking. Extract from recovery debrief, transcribed by hand. Speech simple. Names omitted. We went in when the wind dropped. The door seals were iced, but the heat inside held some. We had 4 on the team. We called and got our voices back at us. It was a weird place. You know how bad insulation makes you feel cold? This air made our chests feel empty. We found 2 bodies in bunks, one in the hallway. No marks. Just open mouths and blood on the lip and no frost inside, so it was inside work. In comms, there was one man sitting under the strobe. He had a pen and his forearm out. He had lines written there, but the middle of each line was blank. He had a strip of tape on his chest with a 6 in Sharpie. The strip was half peeled. He looked up when we came, and then he looked past us like he was counting something that wasn't there. We asked his name. The audio on my collar cut to nothing right then, and there was the little high ring you get in your ear after a fire alarm, except there was no alarm. It made me mad in a small way because it was wrong. He put his hand on the recorder by his knee and pushed play. We heard a man say, "Okay, roll call," and then blank holes in that ring over and over like someone flicked a knife across a glass edge. The man under the light tapped the recorder and pointed at a red sticker stuck to it with a 7 on it. He said. He gave it, and coughed and put a hand to his chest. We asked who. He took a breath to answer, and nothing came. He shut his mouth and shook his head and reached for his forearm and put his finger in the emptiness where a name should have been. He held it there like he could warm it up and bring it back. We waited. The whiteboard behind him had a grid and arrows, and all the lines had faded into the wall. The door tags were blank. Our mics kept getting dead air when we tried to say our own. We started using numbers. We carried him out. On the way past the mess, there was a strip of floor that made no foot sound. We stepped over it on the marks they had made with tape. You could feel the edge against your boot like dry ice. In the main corridor, the wind found a crack and sang low. After a step, the song cut, and there was that thin ring again. It was in my ear all the way back to the sleds. It got fainter when we said nothing. It came back when I tried to say the man's name who sat under the red light. I stopped trying. The map in the entry was on, but it was just white. It lit our faces and made the gear look clean. When I turned off the recorder, the last thing on the tape was that ring. It hung in the room after the machine clicked dead, like it didn't care if it had a source. We closed the door and left it there. When I wrote this later, the place in the form for names went slick under my pen. I left it blank. Above that line, I can still hear it. The ring. The dead air where the word should go. I hope you enjoyed that one. Sometimes these stories stay with you longer than you expect. If you'd like to hear more, subscribe for the next night's story. Like the video if you enjoyed it, and maybe watch another before the lights go out. See you in the next one.